Hi everyone, it's Sunday night, July 14th. I'm just going to post a quick video around the ePortfolio and looking at the different angles that the ePortfolio and what we have to start looking at. So there's no rush on this. Obviously, we discussed the ePortfolio at length during residency, but I just thought it would be a good start to give you a short introduction to our perspectives on ePortfolio, what uses it might serve, and what role it might play, and why we selected as part of the assignment for this course. So objectives today is to explore the objectives of portfolio at two different levels: pedagogical purpose and professional purpose. So both, obviously a lot of you educators are both within your own practice, within your toolbox, in terms of assessment probably, and then also for your own use and your professional purpose. And that's the main, obviously, focus of the use in this course. And then we'll see the skills from the basis of assignment 3. So we're double checking and ensuring that the skill set is aligned to attempt this exercise later in the course. So if it's not, that you reflect about what you need to develop and hone in on. So what is a portfolio? So first of all, it's identified two different dimensions for exploration, and I've listed them here. The first one would be the usefulness as part of our pedagogical tool for assessment. So we educators, why is the portfolio useful to us, and why might we want to reflect on it? And then the use in the professional environment as a platform for growth. That's your own personal use, and that's what we're going to focus on in this course. But before we move on to the second dimension, it is important that we review. Obviously, we're killing two birds with one stone here. We're getting you to use it for professional development purposes, but we are also obviously encourage you to think about the potential it has in terms of teaching and learning, as we demonstrated and use it with you in the first place. Then within this usefulness as part of your pedagogical toolbox, you probably have to distinguish two different sort of environments and sectors, so the K-12 sector and higher ed. It is used increasingly in both. I've given you a short video there and that sort of explains what an ePortfolio is. And then I encourage you to look at the work, if you have time, obviously, the work of James Basham. He's a colleague that I've come across with my work on universal design for learning. And he has that wonderful expression that uses then, I've given you just one citation to illustrate the fact that it uses this expression, digital backpack. So he talks about K-12 kids and the digital backpack, and he's done a lot of writing around using ePortfolio for assessment. A lot of really, really useful work. So we've had him when I was working with Gil, we had him as a guest speaker, and he did quite a bit of work for us, showcasing the use of ePortfolios within the campus. And you've got a fairly long YouTube video there. I don't expect you to engage with this now, but you may want to go back to that. It's a full sort of 50-minute presentation that he does around ePortfolios and digital backpack. It's not just in K-12, and in higher ed, obviously, it's used more and more. You have a video there from also a link. It's not a video, it's a website from Educourse, a page on Educourse, which details the growing relevance of ePortfolios within higher education. And obviously, you see them used now in this master's course. They're used in many master's courses. They are also increasingly used in BEd courses as a sort of the final assessment of the BEd program. And in other disciplines as well, in other fields, it's more and more frequent for people to have to produce an ePortfolio as a final product, whether the platform is LinkedIn or whether it's different websites of its own, or different sort of different media. But the aim is always really the same. So all of these really go back to, whether in say K-12 and higher ed, to the benefits of the use of ePortfolios for pedagogical reasons. And we're going to skip straight to the second slide, because I've tried to, again, trying to make a link with theory, which is going to be important in the masters, to list several learning theories. So last time we talked about in the link was big global theories. And as I said, as you go down this pyramid of scope and width, you are going to be sometimes in more narrow theories that are sometimes very specific to learning. And there's a long list, obviously, there. You're going to encounter many such theories. So I've listed a few here that do come into account when we talk about ePortfolio. Project-based learning. So project-based learning is a sort of field of its own, with theory and with some literature of its own. And obviously, you can see how it fits the ePortfolio fits within project-based learning, because you are sort of autonomous, you are directing the work, you are making the executive and decisive choices. So it really empowers you as the learner to make the choices and really sort of frames it as a project. Project-based learning is really can be seen as the theory. Behind that, you will very quickly come on to the notion of constructivism. So I'm just dropping that seed now. If you've not encountered constructivism yet, you are going to have a quick look at it. The notion of constructivism was started by Piaget, and then sort of forks off in two different dimensions. And we have constructivism, which remains sort of pretty unified in its thinking, and social constructivism, which takes off and has an author of its own, no longer Piaget, but called Vygotsky, who's a Russian writer from the early century, who frames constructivism in a slightly different way and calls it social constructivism. But essentially both, for the moment, it's important just for you to know that both ask us to reframe learning in a non-traditional way by saying that learning knowledge is not a commodity. It's not something that we have and we pass on to a student, so we don't transfer knowledge to a student. It argues that really knowledge is something that we construct individually. And so Piaget, through his what do you call it, schemas of, he was a psychologist, a childhood psychologist. Through his sort of cognitive study and the premises he puts forward, argues that really the brain, as it develops, constructs knowledge and constructs it through activity, through exercise, autonomous exploration of things that surround us, and that is how knowledge is acquired. It's not something which is transferred. Obviously, once we accept that the premise of constructivism, then it's going to be important for us no longer to stand in front of the room and to try and transfer anything, since that's not how knowledge is acquired, but to instead create optimal conditions for learners to be able to construct learning from the best possible variety and diversity of experiences that they encounter. So we become someone on the sideline that really constructs and designs an environment where then students can be fairly autonomous in the way they construct knowledge. Obviously, you can see how e-portfolios fit within that under the umbrella of project-based learning, but project-based learning in a wider way fits within constructivism. Another theory you're going to encounter is experiential learning. Obviously, experiential learning is a theory that, well, not obviously, but it relates to the work of Kolb, who started writing about this in the 1980s and now has been used widely by a lot of other authors. The notion of experiential learning is really, again, Kolb makes a representation of what he sees learning to be. It's a four-step cyclical process that, according to him, goes through and comes from first-hand experience with the world. And he argues that really knowledge is never acquired through textbook or second-hand understanding via a teacher, but it really necessarily always has to involve a part of first-hand connection with the real world, where we see these phenomena, these concepts, these principles at play. So experiential learning obviously leads us to want to do two things: to want to bring our learning into the outside, since that's where the students are going to be having the first-hand experiences, and short of that, to try and bring the outside world into the classroom. So you can think of augmented reality, virtual reality, technology generally, trying to bring outside events and experiences into the classroom so that the learner can still have that first-hand experience. So how does the ePortfolio fit within experiential learning? Well, obviously, because you're autonomous and because you are doing things, you are going to have first-hand experience with putting this together. You're not going to be relating things that we discussed. You're not going to be synthesizing or reformatting things that I format or that I express in the first place. You are going to be tapping into your own voice, and you're going to be doing this through a lot of first-hand experiences. You will be making choices, you will be selecting things, you'll be exploring and experimenting with tools and with media and with all sorts of things. And so there's a very close connection between ePortfolio and experiential learning theory. Then obviously we have the whole sort of body of inclusive literature around differentiation and individualized learning. The fact that really, if we accept the fact that learning is a highly individualized process, and that even as individuals, we vary the way we learn at different times and in different places and through different lessons, then we need to actually be as fully flexible and diverse as we can in our approaches to learning. And we need to give multiple pathways to students to be able to engage with the material in the most individualized and personalized way. I'm sure most of you have had some connection with differentiation and with inclusion itself. So ePortfolio is going to fit within the literature on inclusion, because obviously it's allowing for this individualization and personalization of knowledge. It's doing more than that. It's actually encouraging hyper, I would say, individualization and hyper personalization, because when I come to mark your ePortfolios, none of them are going to be in any way similar to the other. And that's absolutely perfect. So really, we're working with rubrics where we're accepting that the work is fully individualized, that you all choose your own voice, your own way of expressing yourself, you make your own choices, and we're looking at the rubrics in the widest of sense, allowing you all of the possible pathways to get to the objective of the assessment. It closely connected, but not exactly identical, is this notion, obviously, of accessible learning. And here we're going to refer to things like, the social model of disability that I've already talked a little bit about. This notion that really disability is not something inherent, a label that people have, but it's an experience that they have when they're confronted with something which is not a design for their own embodiment, for their own way of doing things. So the social modeling invites us to redesign and to go through this process with all of the learning experiences that we create, so that we can design with barriers in mind, to remove barriers to the maximum level, degree that we can, and to allow people to not feel and experience a perception of disability when they engage with the learning experience that we've created or with our learning resources material. So again, the ePortfolio is aligned with the notion of social model of disability, because there are no barriers, in the sense that you are creating your own pathways to the objective. So that if you are conscious of your own embodiment, you're conscious of your preferences, you're conscious of the things that work for you and don't work for you, then you are able to choose a format, or choose a way of presenting, or choose a way of demonstrating skills that is your own, and that you've chosen to optimally sort of enable you to show your strength. And then you'll be able to avoid any situation or tasks that would do the opposite, and that would make you have a perception of being disabled by that activity. So in a way, the ePortfolio really aligns itself well with the social model, and it's the ultimately accessible assessment tool, because you are able to navigate freely and to avoid activities and tasks that actually would create potentially barriers for you if you've identified those in your analysis of yourself. Also connects with the notion of free will and student choice in learning. It's something that has been written about by several authors, all the way from what we would call the humanists. So if you look at Rousseau, for example, on the just after the French Revolution, so the sort of siècle des Lumières, so the century of the Enlightenment, there was an awful lot of writing around education and free will, and really all the way up to reflections I mentioned already around Decky and Ryan, about intrinsic motivation, the fact that if you make choice, if they are genuine choice that tap into an intrinsic motivation, we are more likely to achieve higher level needs, such as the need to self-realize. So if you go back to my little video for Unit 2, you will see that I've discussed this already, and it does connect definitely with that as well, in the sense that you are constantly making choices in ePortfolios. The choice is entirely yours. So it's really the ultimate sort of assessment tool to bring up and bring to the surface this notion of student free will and student choice. Strength-based learning is another sort of field of literature, which in a way connects with social model and accessible learning we've seen just above, but not always explicitly. So there's a lot of strengths-based learning literature out there. As a theory, it really assumes that we have strengths and weaknesses, all of us, and that we're made up of a sort of a fresco of strength and weaknesses, and that really teaching should always focus on working with student strength rather than make them confront necessarily the weaknesses that they have. It's not something that will terribly surprise you. Obviously, it's a vocabulary we find in the IEPs, for example. An IEP, when used correctly, should always be focused on the strength of the learner and not on the weaknesses. And it's something that we see both through K-12 and higher education. So why is the ePortfolio aligned with strength-based learning? Well, obviously, again, because you're making the choices, it presumes that if you have taken the time to assess your learning sort of preferences, and that you know and assess correctly the things that you're good at, then you will be able to choose those pathways and those ways of demonstrating your skills within the ePortfolio. And therefore, you will be able to work from your strength rather than having to deal with weaknesses. And then there's this other notion of curriculum co-creation, what I talked a little bit about, since I've said really the whole of Unit 1, I was working under this premise of curriculum co-creation, in the sense I was letting you talk. And then from your talk, I was extracting concepts and ideas from the literature that might be helpful in you in continuing your reflection. So curriculum co-creation is really, again, aligns well with the portfolio, or vice versa. The portfolio aligns well with curriculum creation because you will be focusing obviously on certain themes, on certain writing, on things that have relevance to you, and that in a way you will be creating your own curriculum through this course by focusing on these elements rather than others. Obviously, we try and act as facilitators and open your scope and your vision to many different concepts and ideas and theories, but then you are making choices and you're pursuing in a more advanced way, going further with some of these elements where someone else may be going in another way. So again, when I assess your ePortfolios, I'm seeing curriculum co-creation in full action, because you will be focusing on very different things and still fulfilling the rubrics in the same way, which is ideal, because really you're learning about what you want to learn as opposed to learning what we are forcing you to sort of focus on. So all of these relate to this first dimension of ePortfolio. Why is it useful in a toolbox? So this is useful to you if you reflect on using ePortfolio as an educator within your classroom or within your school. But obviously, it's going to be useful in this second section, and this is why I've introduced this video now in the third section of Unit 1, where we are looking at you as a learner and you as a person having preferences. So this reflection and is works well with the reflection that you're starting as well in week 3 of Unit 1, and that's why I wanted to post this little video now. So that's for dimension 1, but as remember that dimension 2 was really the use of professional environment as a platform for growth. Because ePortfolios are obviously used for assessment and within academic premise. But what really we would like you to be able to do with ePortfolio is to take it with you, to continue feeding it and nurturing it and developing it through your masters, and then to be able to use it for professional development. So it's used for showcasing skill for job applications, obviously, and you have a short link that you can go and view around that. But I think it's something obviously that is self-explanatory. Preparing for grants for scholarship application and grants. If you're interested in going beyond the masters and you're looking at applications for grants and scholarships, which are frequent, obviously in graduate studies, often your portfolio is what you will present as a supporting piece for those applications. Developing credibility with the whole board. So obviously, as a master's student, you are going to start looking at maybe publications eventually in the long term. And when you send something for publication, the first hurdle, obviously there's peer review, which comes only 2 peer reviews, which come in the process. But the first hurdle is really to convince an editor that your work is worth selecting and picking out of the pile, and then moving it on to a review process with reviewers. How does that happen? Well, you have to have credibility within the community. And that's what I would argue the ePortfolio and portfolio generally allows you to do, because it's online, because it's out there, because it demonstrates your skill and your credibility. It enables you to start that process. Also, it's a tool to discover and join communities of scholars, because obviously, as I've said, your process is hyper-personalized, hyper-individualized. You're going through curriculum co-creation, so you will end up focusing on very specific things. And then there should be ways that you can connect your ePortfolio with other people who are interested in the same thing in the outside world. So no longer the royal roads, but beyond that, and starting to build relationship, collaborative enterprises with people in those communities that are specifically looking at the same things that you're interested in. Build an organic record of your academic accomplishments. Obviously, that is something that is always useful, because you go through a master's, someone may look at your transcript and see that you've done these different courses, but it's always very useful, whether it's a job application or another degree or a scholarship application, to be able to demonstrate and have a narrative and tell a story, which is sometimes more interesting than just a transcript or a series of marks. Possible use in relation to job application employment. So obviously showcasing the skills for job application, but it in itself becomes a tool often for the process of selection. So it's not rare these days that people actually, pop up their e-portfolios during an interview process or at an interview meeting, and use it as a standing board and use it really as a platform to discuss, during employment selection itself, the sorts of skills that they bring into a job. It's a standard requirement for tenure, certainly in higher education. If you ever consider a job in teaching in post-secondary, the tenure track requires a tenure application eventually, and the tenure application usually is done in the form of an e-portfolio. So it's not just teachers in the BEd, but really this follows us right through a career, and as academics, we expect to have that as well. And then you have another video there that is helpful to you. So what tool might we use? So I've already said that we will support you with tools. This is just a short selection, not exhaustive, not definitive, but that will enable you to start this reflection around what do I want to use. So the first of this link is to WordPress, which some of you may like and know. The last one is for Google Sites for the creation of your portfolio, specific. All the other four, actually, you will see are just a sort of a depository, a review of various sites and various applications and software that are being used at the moment in ePortfolio. So Weebly, Wix, and as many others that I've not had a chance to use, but are also available to you. Some of them will have pros and cons. I find that usually it's a matter of user friendliness. I see some students go onto WordPress and hate it. I see some students go onto Wixy and hate it. Others go on Weebly and hate it, and vice versa. And sometimes people instantly like a site, like the way it's designed, the way it's functioning, and then wish to continue with that. So I encourage you at the moment just some exploration before you arrive in residency. Start looking around. You have no definite choice to make, but obviously it's good to start this sort of this process of curiosity, so that when you are arriving and we're having more tangible conversation, more concrete conversations around the choice of platform, you've done this sort of playful exploration, and you're able to make then the choices that you need to make during residency. So I hope this was helpful. I'm closing off now, and a little later tonight I will be posting a few notes for week 3 of Unit 1. But as I've explained, you are now reviewing yourself as a learner, and therefore looking at things like learning preferences and learning profile, and how you see yourself as a learner, and what choices you are maybe attracted to as a learner. Have a good night, and I will speak to you soon.